Hello, I'm Roger Bisbee from the Skill Builder channel. I'm just doing a little bit of damp work in this cellar. It's not horrendous. What I did first of all here is I tanked it with this cementitious crystalline render, if you like, slurry that you put on the wall. And what that does is when the moisture comes into it, it kind of reforms itself. So even if initially when you put it in, you see damp patches over the months, the damp actually activates the crystals inside it and it locks it up. And it's done a great job. It's actually held back most of the damp. It's got 2 layers on it, so you put the one layer on at right angles to the other. Having said that, there's a very slight bit here and there that comes through, and I thought it would be nice to plaster it and start to make the place look a little smarter. Before I plaster it, I want to make sure that it's absolutely 100%, because the last thing I want is damp coming through on the plaster. Now, it's important to say that this is a cellar, and if you've got a lot of hydrostatic pressure, if you've got water pressure coming through and it's at the bottom that it normally comes through, then you probably need to do something like a drained cavity, where you have the plastic membrane that goes on the wall with the little studs, and any water that gets in trickles down, and then you have a drain in the cellar to take it away. And if you're going to use the cellar for a habitable space, you really need to do that. If you want it to be passed off by building inspectors, then you really need to do that. In this case, this is a cellar which is used occasionally for storage, all kinds of other things, and I'm quite happy that I've stopped the damp coming through enough not to bother with that drained cavity idea. The alternative is to use this, which comes from Safeguard Europe and is a flexible membrane. It's got a fleece on both sides of it. So what you do with this is you stick it onto the wall with their Drybase adhesive, and that adhesive in itself is a waterproof barrier. The adhesive is doing an awful lot to keep that water out. This is a secondary layer, if you like, that goes over the top that makes it absolutely belt and braces. Now, this has been tested up to 2 feet of static water, so the water pressure of up to 2 feet will be resisted by sticking this on the wall, provided it's stuck on properly. Over and above that, if you start going above that, you really need to do something else. You either need to stop the water coming in by doing something on the outside, which is my preferred thing, or you need to kind of admit defeat, if you like, and go for this drained cavity so that if any water does get in, it gets rid of it. But if you've got an above ground situation, if you just want to stop the damp coming through on certain walls, then this is an ideal product to do it. So you can use it in cellars up to a certain extent, or you can use it above ground and it's perfectly okay. So in this particular case, the ground level is about there, so really okay, I'm pushing my luck on the 2 feet, but as I say, I've already put this on, which has done 90% of the job. What you would do normally if you put this on is you would run it horizontally along the whole surface, but of course that means I've got to go round the corners with it. It gets more difficult to handle if you start doing longer lengths, so I'm going to cut it into handleable pieces, and because it is actually slightly wider than this alcove here, I'm going to turn it round the corners, and then I'm going to carry on with another piece. If you're doing it above ground, if you're doing it in a room, the best way you can possibly do it is to just run it along the wall as you go, bit by bit. Don't mix up more adhesive than you can use at, say, half an hour. You know, do it a metre at a time and you should be fine, but it does go off fairly quickly. Now, before you start, you've got to make sure your wall is firm and okay, and if the wall's damp, that's not a problem, but you don't want anything on there that's going to dust off, so give it a good brush off, get rid of any loose debris, and then you're ready to go. I'm going to damp the wall off slightly just to give the adhesive a slightly longer open time. Now, you might be wondering which side you put against the wall. In actual fact, it doesn't really make any difference, because there's a fleece on that side and there's a fleece on that side. Just for good order, I think we're going to put it black side against the wall and we'll have the grey side showing. And that, when it dries, will actually be a waterproof layer. I've left a gap at the bottom here. That wasn't a mistake. That gap is to stop any moisture that did come in at the bottom from wicking up onto the actual material itself. And then when I plaster over this, I'm going to use a bonding coat over it and then a finish coat, although I think I could actually get away with a finish coat without the bonding. If you need to straighten the wall out, then the bonding's good and it won't do any harm. Penetrations, you want to keep those to a minimum, but in this case I had to do this. So what you would do is you'd probably use a bit of polymer around there after you've done this, something like HP42, CT1, any of those, where you can just seal off any gaps. If you're trying to drill, if you've got to put a radiator on the wall or something like that, putting screws in, then what I do is a drill, squirt a bit of polymer in there, put the wheel plug in there, screw the thing in, and there's nothing going to come through that. Okay, so I'm going to carry on round and do the rest of it. Now when you overlap and put the adhesive on, say 75mm would be fine. So I'm going to overlap on that corner. I'll bring the other one round so that it sits right into that corner there. I know this is dry. This has all got a damp proof course in it here. So I'm going to bring it up to there. When I've finished, when I've gone round the wall as well, I've got this water main here to disconnect, which is easy enough. So I'll put a piece up there. I'm not going to go up behind that fuse board because actually it's bone dry there. You can see it's just about above ground level. There's nothing coming through there. So you can see a very, very faint trace here where you can see where the water line has been. And that was when I first put this crystalline slurry on the wall, and it was just adjusting itself to the moisture. So you can see the moisture came through and then it kind of self-sealed. It really is marvelous stuff. So this is the wall after I've given it a few days to dry out, and it did take longer to dry out than I thought because basically all the moisture is escaping through the front. Nothing is escaping through the substrate because you've got a waterproof barrier there. So it took several days to dry out, but now it is dry. It's rained outside, nothing has come through, so I'm absolutely delighted with the result. As I said at the beginning of this video, this system is not really intended for basements. So if you've got hydraulic pressure, if you've got water that's forcing its way through the structure that you can't stop, then this isn't going to solve the problem. But if you've just got a bit of damp wall coming through, if it's just basically on the odd rainy day and it's damp in your cellar, then this is absolutely fine. And the real application for this is above ground. If you've got damp coming through the walls and you can't solve it any other way and you just don't want it appearing on the inside, this is a fantastic system for that. If you can allow the water to evaporate to the outside, then that's absolutely perfect. But what you don't want is water evaporating through the walls into the inside of the house, because if you do that, you just build up the moisture in the house and then you've got to get rid of it. And getting rid of airborne moisture in the house necessarily means that you're going to be getting rid of heat at the same time, unless you've got yourself a heat recovery ventilation system, which very few people have. So the key to it is keep as much moisture out of the building as you possibly can. This idea of letting it breathe is a bit of nonsense really, because buildings don't breathe. The water evaporates into the house. That's what happens, and that's not a good thing to happen. So all this nonsense about, oh, we've got to allow buildings to breathe, let all that come, don't put plastic paints on the inside, fantastic. But what are you going to do? In this day and age when we need to keep our windows closed, we need to keep our heat in, we all know that the bills are rising, we need to find sensible solutions which which stop the damp at source, and this is one of them. If you want more details on this system, check out Safeguard Europe's website. Don't call me, call them. By the way, you might notice a little bit of moisture here where I just disconnected a bit of plumbing. That's nothing to do with damp coming through the wall. That's just me not catching the drips, if you like. But the reason we're doing this is because our next video is going to be on how to boost your mains water pressure. So if you've got low water pressure, check out our video from AccuBoost Salamander coming up very soon.